Wherever you are, and welcome to this fireside chat organized by the Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability Fellowship. Today, I am extremely delighted to welcome a very special guest, Her Excellency Ambassador Marie-Louise Wegter, who's the Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations from Denmark. Ambassador Wegter joined the United Nations as the Deputy Permanent Representative in August 2019. And she has a sprawling career in diplomacy. She was previously working in a range of leading positions in the Danish Foreign Services, most recently as the Deputy in Office of the Humanitarian Action, Migration and Civil Society from 2016 to 2019, and as Deputy Permanent Representative of Denmark to the United Nations in Geneva from 2012 to 2016. In addition, Marie-Louise has previously served as head of ministry's Global Green Growth Secretariat. She holds an MSc from the Copenhagen Business School and has also studied at the American University in Cairo. Your Excellency, welcome to GPODS, and we are so excited to be speaking to you today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this invitation. It's really an honor for me to get this chance to engage with you and your fellows this morning. So good morning, afternoon to all of you. So what I'm going to do is start by giving you a very quick, Abid already said a little bit, but a quick rundown of my career. And then I'm tasked to give you sort of a keynote on the state of public diplomacy in the 21st century. And that's, of course, a very broad and exciting topic. But if there are two things that have really shaped public diplomacy in the 21st century more than anything, it's, of course, globalization, and secondly, sort of social media and the revolution in communication technology. And well, since I'm here in New York in working with the UN, I would like to take my point of departure in the UN, give you my take on why I think UN is such an important institution today, and also give you a sense of how public diplomacy plays into global issues, because we often think about public diplomacy as something that relates to national politics and national governments, but it really has a lot or has a big impact on global shaping of global policies as well. And I hope that I will have time to give you 3 cases taken from some of the issues I've been dealing with during my own career. The first would be sort of from the beginning of globalization, early days of globalization, the cartoon crisis that some of you might remember, the older ones of you, and the second, the Paris Agreement, and the third would be the Global Compact on Migration. And I, as I said, I will try to sort of both point to the role of the UN and the role of public diplomacy in shaping of these issues. And again, please feel free. I don't know if I will be able to see if you have a chat function, but if there is need for clarification, I am happy to be interrupted along the way. I get very tired of listening for myself for 20 minutes, but here we go. First about me, I've been in the Danish Foreign Service since 1997. Before my posting here, I was, as Abid mentioned, in Geneva as a posting where I dealt also to the UN in Geneva, where I dealt with the Human Rights Council mainly. And before that, I was in my early days in Nicaragua on a bilateral posting. And the rest of the time, I've basically been in Copenhagen dealing with, for a long time, the Middle East and North Africa, green growth, humanitarian affairs, human rights, civil society, and migration. Then I've been on leave 3 times, twice to take care of my 2 boys that are now big. And then once for 2 years where I worked as a research or analyst in the Danish Institute for International Studies, where I actually dealt with the public diplomacy. So that's and now, of course, in New York, permanent representative here in the UN. And I have to say just a little bit about being a Dane working with the UN. which is quite privileged because the UN is very popular in Denmark. In fact, last year, Pew did a survey of the popularity of the UN around the world, and Denmark actually came in as number one. 80% of all Danes being asked said that they had a favorable view of the UN. The global median was 63, so not bad at all, but nevertheless. And I think the reason why this is so for Danes, it's one is that we are a small country, and if you're a small country, you really don't question the value of an international rules-based order. You don't like to walk alone in the schoolyard if there are no supervisors and no rules when you're a small country. So we really value the muscle we get from being part of the EU, of course, but also the rules-based orders that was international order that was established after World War II. And the second reason that I just want to mention is that we have a very, very strong sense of international solidarity in Denmark. We for more than 40 years straight, we have lived up to the UN goal of providing 0.7 of our GDP to overseas development assistance. And I think this is born out of the fact that we are ourselves a very egalitarian society. And so there is this moral indignity about, we have this sense of moral justice that when we see inequalities in the world, we get we tend to want to change that, and of course that's also a huge reason why we support the UN. Now, the UN performs a lot of functions in global politics, and sometimes they are a little bit hidden. And one very important function for I would say world peace and development, or social development of globally, is that it gives us a shared language and a shared frame of reference to find political and diplomatic solutions to the challenges we are faced with. And it's not very visible often, but it's very important. And I want to give you, as I said, these three examples. The first one, as I mentioned, is the cartoon issue. This is back from this happened in 2005. I was back then the desk officer for our Egypt desk in the Middle East office, and what came to be known as a cartoon crisis basically erupted on my desk. And to make a very, very long story short, what basically happened was a Danish newspaper printed some cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad, and one of them was with a bomb in his turban. And not surprisingly, this caused offense to a lot of Danish Muslims, but not only to Danish Muslims. It also traveled abroad, and this was sort of the first time we saw this type of, we were. And also speaking Danish, we were used to, having our communication to ourselves in Denmark. But all of a sudden, because it also was the pictures, it traveled across the globe. And before we knew it, we were the epicenter of a fairly international crisis. We had huge demonstrations all around the world where we had Muslims living. Danish flags were being burned, and our embassies in Syria, Lebanon, and Tehran, where they were burned down, and that was quite a shocking experience.
And you were in Egypt that point of time, is it?
No, I'm in Copenhagen here, but I'm the desk officer for Egypt, and the issue kind of started with the Egyptian government. But so this was and being Danish, I mean, I had been traveling, as you said. I was studying at the American University Cairo when I was young, and when you were traveling around as a Dane, it was all like, football and butter, and all of a sudden we were like, so this was quite something. But in the middle of this was actually a crisis that was really, really difficult to handle, because we didn't have a shared language. There was this expectation of the Danish government to apologize for something that an independent newspaper had printed. And that was, for a lot of reasons, very difficult for the Danish government to do. So So clearly we had a clash here, which was about, on the one hand, the value and limits on freedom of expression, and on the other hand, the value and respect of religions. And very clearly, we had a very explosive issue that we as a global community had not had to deal with really before. We had the Rushdie issue, but not at this scale. And so we didn't have a shared language for it. And for that reason, it took a lot longer to handle for governments. And I think the other reason why it took a lot longer for us to handle was that this was a crisis that it erupted between governments, but also with a strong mobilization through public diplomacy of the public, and succeeding to that extent that sort of the public opinion, I mean, the event just took its own course and got out of control of those governments who were pushing it, and became impossible for at a governmental level to close down when that was sort of desired. So a little bit an example of a public diplomacy who got out of control, you might say. But to come back to the use of the UN in this situation, in the aftermath of the crisis, the Organization of Islamic Conferences, they started to push for a resolution in the Human Rights Council on defamation of religions, and that did not go well down with the EU and a lot of our like-minded, because human rights are established to protect the individual and not religions. So we had a lengthy, there were many years of negotiations and presenting of competing resolutions until 2011, where we agreed on this landslide compromise resolution called 1618. And it's always called 1618, referred to that because its real name, and I'll just read it to you, is combating intolerance, negative stereotyping, and stigmatization of and discrimination, incitement to violence and violence against persons based on religion or belief. So 1618. And this is basically the resolution we needed back in 2005-06, because it provided a shared language and a shared understanding of the balance of the interests of all involved in this matter. So I think it's a very beautiful example of the value of the resolutions that we negotiate in the UN, and that sometimes can seem a bit lofty, but which really serves a purpose, and would have been, I mean, that resolution, to have had that back in 2005 would have been good. But of course, we were also the reason why it didn't came about. The second issue I wanted to touch is of course climate crisis, and that's rather self-evident that this is not an issue that any national government can meaningfully deal by itself. It's inherently a global issue, and so the UN has also been dealing with this since forever. And since the Kyoto Protocol in 97, we have really tried to agree to new and higher standards for CO2 reduction of CO2 emissions, and basically failing. And then we had the Paris Agreement that sort of flipped things around and said, well, we will instead set an objective not for each individual, but for the sort of what as a world, what's the objective, and then require each country that is party to the agreement to set nationally determined contributions. And I think this is a really good example of the UN being innovative. That's not something you hear a lot about the UN, but it is an innovative way of ensuring that we have, even when we can't really agree, we have a shared objective, we have a shared framework, and walk in the same direction. And then, of course, when you don't have sort of a fixed standard that you have to that you have bound yourself to, then you need something to sustain momentum. And this is where a very active UN Secretary General will come in. He has been working very hard to uphold momentum this, keep member states to the fire. And an example, I think, good example of this is the climate summit that was held in 2019, where the Secretary General, something completely new. He said that if heads of state of government wanted to come and speak to that event, they would have to come with new ambitious commitments. And this was something not seen before. Normally you just come in by rank and everybody has the chance to speak. So here, you can only come to the table if you have something to offer. And this type of sort of innovative thinking of keeping the country to their promises have really been effective. But it's also so it's an example of how the Secretary General functions as a convener, agenda setter, and a keeper of momentum. But coming back to public diplomacy and the role, I think. It's very clear that the Paris Agreement had not succeeded if it hadn't been for also the huge public pressure there was on world leaders at the time, I think it's important to understand that is also something that has been created through public diplomacy of the UN setup, and of the governments who were working towards reaching an agreement on the Paris Agreement. So. Yeah.
So, Ambassador Wegter, since you're talking about the Paris Agreement, I'm tempted to bring in one question that at least 3 people have asked, and they want your views on that. That since somebody, so Mr. Bhavdeep Modi, who is from the Red Lantern Analytica, he's asked that since the advent of Donald Trump on the global political scene, the United States, it withdrew from the Paris Peace Agreement, and that has set a precedent in front of nations like China and Turkey, who are taking a much more unilateral approach. Do you think that this sort of a culture would change after President Biden taking office in the United States? So this question in various forms have come from 3 different people, including Sridat Patnam from the Economist Group and Rajnidhi from Odisha Legislative Assembly. So if you could comment on that, please.
I think it's hugely important that the US will come back into the Paris Agreement, and I think we will see that sort of on the first day of Biden's office, that will be announced, and that is of course really, really important. But I also have to say that it's not like you also have seen a China that has been and India that have been moving towards more progressive goals, even in the time of Trump. So I think it's bigger than any of us, and I think that everybody knows that this is the most important issue we are dealing with as a global community at the moment, and everybody needs to, and particularly of course the big emitters, they have to contribute, even if there for a period of time is 1 or 2 countries that is taking another view on this issue. It doesn't mean that the rest of us can then take a break. But of course it's really, really important for a lot of reasons that the US now coming back to the Paris Agreement, no doubt about that.
Well, thank you. And before we move to the 3rd case study, I'm just itching to ask you about the first case that you talked about the cartoon crisis. And I'm just thinking that it must have been such a hard problem to handle, because an independent newspaper, which is not run by the government, publishes something, and that brews this whole crisis for a nation where Denmark as a country is being almost held accountable for something that the government did not really do. So it must have been a really, and if you're in diplomacy, it's almost like, a problem can come from any side and you'll have to just deal with it.
Very true. And it was really, really difficult. And because also, because it also touched on because I think everybody or most people could understand that there was that this that the Muslim could take offense of this. But at the same time, this was because it was an independent newspaper, and there was this demand for the government to apologize. It ignited this defense of something very, very important, our freedom of expression, which is sort of sacred, and so it was almost like an impossible not to loosen, and it really. And I really think that, as I said, the fact that we had it discussed that you had a UN to where we could discuss this, and where we could really sort of put the different concerns on the table in sort of in peacetime, the whole debacle had sort of calmed down, was very helpful. But you're very right. You do not know where it comes from, or how it can hit you, and of course the big, and I'll come back to that when we talk about the issue of the Global Compact for migration. The sort of the big unknown is how is of course the public pressure, and how in the globalized work how that moves and affects governments.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to hearing from you on that.
Right. All right. So the third case is the issue of migration, and in 2015, the borders of Europe were run by or over by Syrian refugees. And besides that, of course, being a humanitarian tragedy of dimensions, that we also from Denmark and Europe have been sort of trying to alleviate for a very, very long time. But then it was also a very profound experience for most Europeans. I think this inability to control your borders, whether it's your country or your house, basically, that's a very profound experience. And this gave momentum for a renewed sort of European interest in the issue of migration, irregular migration. How do we actually deal with that? And migration is interesting globally because it's a phenomenon that looks very different according to where you sit on the planet. It's multifaceted, and well, it can be an issue of brain drain, it can be an issue of protection of human rights, a humanitarian issue, a crime issue of smugglers, and border control, etc., etc.
Or a climate change issue.
That too, yes. So and unlike the refugee, with the issues of refugee, where we have a convention, it's fairly regulated, we have a shared language, an agreement on how to deal with issues. We lack the shared language and the shared framework to deal with the issue of migration. And that was basically fixed in 2018 with the UN Global Compact on Migration, which was the product of very long and hard negotiations here in New York. But unlike the Paris Agreement, where I think everybody was on top of public diplomacy and shaping the public opinion, it was completely neglected during the negotiation of this issue. So we were basically not on top of the narrative around the compact. So when it came to its adoption, governments around the world was thrown back by a counter narrative that came from sort of far right, SOMI platforms, and several governments, including Austria and including Switzerland, who had been facilitating the negotiations around the compact. They were unable to adopt this compact that they had been negotiating. And that was basically because the public pressure mounted, and in Denmark it was a huge issue, and fortunately we had a prime minister who really stepped up and said, no, we're not going to be, pushed around. And it was a right-wing government, but he was like, we're not going to be pushed around by sort of far right-wing pressure on this issue, and we're going to be a part of the international community here and take responsibility. So there was the three cases. I think these are three cases where the UN has served to provide a shared language, shared direction, shared frameworks for nations to work together on the global issues. And also 3 cases that where public diplomacy and the public opinion plays in 3 very different ways. So each in their own right, I think they're quite interesting to study if you're interested in public diplomacy and global politics.
I mean,
but yeah,
it's really interesting because when you compare these cases in the cartoon crisis, the public opinion was so overwhelming that it pressurized the governments to do something about it on something that they did not probably have complete control of. And when you're talking about the migration issue, it looks like there wasn't enough of public opinion, and that's the reason some of the governments could be bowed down by the local domestic right-wing pressures. So I think there's also something to say about having too much public opinion and having too little of it. Both they create a difference. And as you said, that's probably the unknown over here, that how is that going to play out in the equation?
Yes, and always very difficult to control. I think it's and that's what's often tough for governments, because we are more comfortable with things we can control, basically.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So we have now questions pouring in from the audience, and I'm just going to take some of the questions that have been submitted to me already, and if we could take those first. So one question that I have over here is, as we set out for the year ahead for COP26, Denmark has been outspoken about their continued commitment to international collaboration on climate action. How do you think COVID-19 and its repercussions have affected attitudes towards climate change, both in Denmark and internationally? I know, as you also mentioned, that there's been just a lot of talk about COVID-19, but I think that it'll be interesting to hear from you about this question.
Well, obviously our focus and the focus of governments is on COVID-19 right now, but I don't see it, for Denmark at least, it doesn't mean in any way that the climate agenda has sort of slided down on our list of priorities. And then I think, and I hope, that COVID-19 is sort of you can say that the pandemic is sort of an equivalent to the climate crisis, but it's sort of in a short span of time. You can say that the climate crisis, we all know, is something that binds us together, that we can't solve. We have to solve it together. It's quite necessary for our, it's a life and death issue. But because it's a long-term issue, it becomes less acute to deal with it in a way. And here you have COVID-19, which has the same features, and we realize how acute it is. So in a way, you can hope that the COVID-19 is an eye-opener for the necessity to have international cooperation and deal with these issues as a global community in a way that we haven't done before. And that's my hope, that it will give a boost to sort of multilateral cooperation, to our commitment and international solidarity. Because again, what's very special about COVID-19 is that this is an issue that hits, north and south, everybody, right? Of course, it with everything, like almost, but it hits girls and women harder. It hits the poor harder, etc. But in terms of north and south, we are in the same boat. So and that's the same with climate, right? So in a way, you can hope, but who knows? But for Denmark, it's at least I can say for sure that it has not pushed the climate agenda down the sort of list of priority.
Sure. Thank you so much for your response. And building off of what you earlier said about, and as you illustrated in your three case studies, the role that the UN plays in building more international solidarity. I have a question which says that, during the UN 75 celebrations at many places across the world this year, there has been also quite a lot of criticism about what the United Nations has not been able to achieve. So, what, in your opinion, are some of the reforms that the United Nations probably should see? And how do you think can the United Nations become more resilient? Can people, the youth, contribute in any way in making United Nations a lot more effective than it is?
Well, first of all, I think the UN, when we talk about the UN, we have to sort of be and how it functions or doesn't function. We need to be specific about what the UN is many things. The UN is the Secretary General. The UN is 193 governments.
Yeah.
And I think some of the so to start with the sort of the UN as an institution, the UN Secretary General, the UN organizations. The Secretary General has been leading a quite ambitious reform program for the UN. I think you've had, I don't remember a single Secretary General who hasn't talked about reforms of the UN, but Guterres has actually been able to get further than anyone else in sort of shaping one UN and making the different organizations work better together and deliver better. And it's still an ongoing process and something we are from Denmark very much engaged in, and to push for to see basically a more efficient and impactful UN. So that's of course like any other organization, and for sure such a big organization as the UN, ongoing process to be on top of how do you deliver most efficiently. But of course some of the real issues that have been a problem or challenge lately has been the fact that the Security Council have not been able to agree on issues, and this is of course the Security Council is just a mirror of global politics, right? So you know, with the rivalry that you have between the US and China, and Russia, then that's what you see playing out, and the UN cannot do anything about it. It's the member states that will have to find solutions to that. So I don't know if that's an answer. I think I think the good news is that when it comes to sort of because last year Guterres was in his opening or the year before, but he for his opening of the 74th General Assembly, he was warning that the world was sort of dividing in two, that it would fall between the US and China in this power play. And I don't, if you look at what's happening in the General Assembly where everybody is represented, you don't see that happening. You see sort of very sort of, both Russia and the US under Trump have been sort of very conflicting on certain matters and standing, but they've been standing alone. They haven't, the rest of us have been saying, no, we actually, want to work together. We want to find compromises. So this very divisive attitude, you can do that for yourself, despite the fact that we have allegiances to either side. I think there's some kind of, what did you call it? But there is a strength in the UN and UN member states and a willingness to work together that you don't just push away like that. So that's on an optimistic note, at least.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us, we do have faith in the system in the United Nations, and it's heartening to know that even during such tough times, since you're telling us that within the United Nations, there hasn't really been a divide where the UNGA is just divided into two camps and people are working together. That certainly gives hope. We have one question, and I'm going to unmute Sahid. So Sahid is one of the GPOD's founding cohorts alumnus, and he'd like to ask a question for you. Yeah.
Thank you very
Sahid,
much,
go ahead.
Marcelo. Thank you. My name is Sahid. I work as a consultant for some organizations in Africa. My question has to do with holding the business community accountable as regards to their commitment to climate change, most especially the airlines industry, where they attempt to transition into using biofuel for fueling their airplanes and so and commitment to really reduce their carbon usage. So what is the perspective of the UN towards, because this is commitment that cuts across different countries, and different countries actually have approach towards dealing with airlines. So what do you think could be the perspective of UN towards ensuring that there's a kind of an holistic approach towards the way they deal with business community in terms of their commitment towards reducing the greenhouse gases?
Thank you, Sahid, for a very difficult question. I think a good question also. I think it's the airline industry, but it's also the shipping industry. I mean, in general, the private sector is, of course, a very key actor in reaching the climate goals and tackling the climate crisis. And it's also what makes it so complicated, because it's the economy is stupid, right? So this is what it makes it so complicated for all nations to agree on shared rules. I think so. What's promising here is more the initiatives that we see from leading companies themselves in sort of trying to agree on different standards. I don't think we can hope. I mean, I've been away from it for a little bit, but it's I don't see the governments agreeing on standards for industry like that. But I do see things happening within the sort of the industry itself. When I was leading the Global Green Growth Forum, we had SAS, the Danish, the Scandinavian airline, who were leading sort of a public-private partnership to try to find a way to accelerate the route to changing fossil fuels with other type of fuels for airlines. That type of issues that I think you will see more and more of company. The Maersk on the shipping side, we have a similar very active Maersk, one of the if not the biggest shipping company in the world, that is taking a lead on how to get to zero emissions of the shipping industry. So that type of it, because you can see that, I mean, increasingly this is something that has happened over the last 10 years, that companies, they see that the future is the future is green. So you need to jump on that to be part of and to be ahead of the curve and to be competitive. So I think that ball rolling, would it be better if governments could just agree on setting standard? Yes, that would be efficient, but it's just not realistic. And again, second best is that then the rest, those that can, they take initiative to move ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. I do have a second question, but I would like some other audience to actually go with some of questions.
Thank you. Right. Sure. And we have Caroline. Caroline is also one of our alumna. So Caroline, over to you. I'm just going to unmute you there.
Thank you, Arpit, and thank you, Your Excellency. That was such an engaging conversation, and I'm just in awe of you right now. My question actually deals with youth empowerment and what role youth can play in development work in order to further the mission of the United Nations, especially now during coronavirus. We've seen a lot of youth jump on board and become involved with political affairs and international affairs because we all of a sudden have this platform that is familiar to youth. So on a more meaningful level, what more can youth do in the future once hopefully, knock on wood, coronavirus, is cured and we are able to return to our daily lives, return to work? How can youth continue their commitment to international development on a meaningful level?
Well, that's a good question, and an important question. I think that it's youth engagement is hugely important. It has and for the climate issue, it's been amazingly important, right? In really sort of pushing governments stand on this. So. And everybody can understand that really, we are dealing with we are responsible for the lives of a future generation when we talk about the climate issue. But it goes for everything basically: women's rights, human rights. It's so important that the youth get engaged and to be frank, I think we do have these youth envoys at the UN, for instance, where we make a point out of getting youth representatives to come and speak directly to the UN and in the conversations we have about these topics. But it is sometimes difficult to sort of point at what more, what else, and I think if I were to point at something, I think what my generation has a hard time getting is how to really utilize the social media and shape public opinion using that. And that's where you have a sort of the whole sort of mass mobilizing a sort of mass enthusiasm for a cause like climate, for instance. That's something that you are able to do that we are not, and we're not as governments. And so staying engaged, sort of just insisting that this is your future, and you need to be engaged in them, and you need to engage other youth to look at other things than I don't know what pop music and what else you're interested in when you're young, but that is just hugely important, and it makes such a difference on the shaping of politics, because governments, they are not immune to what the sort of the larger public wants and the demands. So.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you. And we have time for probably just 2 more questions. So I'll just bring in Murray. Murray is another GPODS alumni. I think our alumnus are now back into their form where they ask a lot of questions to our mentors. So over to you, Murray.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and greetings from Malmö. My question is that there is currently sustainable diplomacy, the narrative being formulated. And from your perspective, I would be interested in learning that what elements would you see being the most important ones, and how we who are still developing professionals could promote it.
So, hi, Mari. Can you just so your question is that just the beginning of your question again? Sorry.
Yeah, that's so sustainable diplomacy that is more towards it's more specified towards the environment and sustainable questions. It's still being formulated globally. So what, from your perspective, because you obviously have much more experience of this, that what do you see are the most important elements in this, and as developing professionals, how we could promote it?
That's a very big question, but I think so. An issue of sustainable energy and sort of the whole agenda for energy for all. We for sort of development of to ensure sort of economic development and social development in the global south, there's a, you know, we need to have a dissemination of energy and sort of folding out the energy grid in many places still, and that has to be sustainable. So that's an important issue, I think. And I would also point maybe to biodiversity, which is, we have a summit coming up there, and that is another issue which is incredibly worrisome, and where I think we have perhaps not had enough sort of attention that deserves sort of the same type of attention that we give the climate. Then I would point to the issue of water and water scarcity in the world, which is also something that I sometimes get quite worried about as a very real issue, and a very real issue that can create conflict around the world very easily. So those three maybe, besides sort of the general climate agenda, but I mean specific topics would be I would think would be important. Oh, something is happening here on my screen. Can you still see me?
Yes, we can. Yes, it's all good now.
Did that answer your question a little bit, Mari?
I can't unmute myself.
No, now we can hear you, Marie.
Perfect. Yes.
We heard you saying you can't unmute yourself.
Okay, yes. You did, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. Tack så mycket.
Tack.
Arpit, you'll also have to unmute yourself.
Oops. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And we have just one more question, time for one more. So Tanisha, if you want to, can we unmute Tanisha? And
hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to ask my question. So I've read that Denmark has announced that it will contribute 50 million to COVAX and an additional 50 million to UNICEF supply to help distribute COVID-19 vaccines to developing countries and to vulnerable people. So I know it's a big question, but what challenges do you expect lie ahead, and what do you think we can expect for 2021 in terms of vaccine distribution?
Well, I think we are all worried that we will not, and this is why we are contributing obviously to COVAX, that we will see that the global south will lag behind. And this is, of course, worrisome for two reasons. One is what concerns me is international solidarity, and that every human being should be treated equally. And the second is that no one is safe until everybody is safe. So now, right now, you see the mutation of COVID going on in South Africa. So until everybody has a vaccine, you have this risk of mutations going on that will then come back and haunt all of us again. So this is something that is really important. So another good issue to sort of get mobilized on to put public pressure on governments is really that we just step up and get everybody vaccinated, get vaccination. I think it's a huge help again that we will have the Biden administration. I hope that they will come in with a commitment also to COVAX and get re-engaged with WHO. So hugely important, and that will help. But really, I wouldn't dare to sit and speculate on how it will be going. But of course, it is a challenge, and we've seen throughout this pandemic that the inclination of governments is, when they are threatened on their lives and of their populations, they look inwards, and they take care of themselves. And at a time when really we need to be looking outwards and making sure that we take care of everybody. And again, that's where the UN has been such an important institution for us to have established, because when everybody was looking in, you had the Secretary General who had, whose job it was to look at the world, and who really sort of very, very quickly put in motion humanitarian programs, development programs, spitting out one policy after the other to deal with this issue. It was super impressive, I think. So again, thank God for the UN.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for taking out the time today and answering all of these questions. It's a pleasure for a fellowship like us, which focuses on the intersection of public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability, to host somebody like you who has experienced and a perspective of dealing with these issues, in different facets of your career. So we really value this conversation and the relationship with you. And thank you so much. You have a really nice day. Before you leave, we'd just like to show you a short video of our fellowship. And after that, we will continue with some of our other audiences with the info session. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
Thank you so much, Abid. It was a pleasure.
Over to you, Aditi, for the video.
Yeah, it's already started.
Because after all, I don't think any of you are involved in this for a purely academic exercise or because you need a job. I wouldn't be here today if that was the case. You're all striving for something bigger.
So how do we make policy?
Policy, or some key elements of a good migration policy, what should be?
How to save the planet.
And what are the theories and concepts related to innovation?
Strategic communications and creating effective messages and public campaigns.
So policy is not only a question of making specific environmental legislations, but also in other fields of policy.
What is the scope of environment, how we should not limit it to our understanding of environment, because environment is inclusive of human beings and not the other way around.
That's taken more to a national and international level, because you are then negotiating these exchanges between nations and between higher level of state governments in order to achieve the best long-term solution. And long-term, of course, is a broad term, because every country has its own system and has their own system of government, and whether or not it's a 4-year elected president or a lifetime king or queen, is up to the country. But ultimately, year by year, the United Nations and just governments in general that interact want to reassess where they stand. And all of this can be seen through the lens of sustainability, because if you aren't considering sustainability as you form your arguments, then what are you really going towards?
Just because we don't have a lot of opportunities just because of the fact of our gender. And this is something that people don't really talk about. So normally when I talk to my friends, we don't talk about how unfair it is that we aren't getting certain opportunities because of gender. And so we don't really realize how widespread it is.
Corporates, their battleground is highly capitalist. So as far as with corporates is concerned, I think governments, agencies will have to intervene to keep them in check when it comes to charging for the resources from the earth. I mean, paying for the resources of the earth, because I think it has gone non-built since a long time now, and
the kind of flexibility that we are looking at into providing youth with the opportunity to do what they really want to do in terms of sports, in terms of theater, literature, arts, etc. I think all of those pieces could really be solidified, and that angle will be a life-changing, not life-changing, sorry, would be a big change in the Indian policy sphere as well. Because the stats are also in favor of the youth, the country has a lot of youth. I think it will be appreciated, and it could be a stepping stone for a lot of youths to come into the policy sector and see how policy defines your life and day-to-day living very differently, right? Because in India, the culture is that we don't really understand how policy and life is interlinked, right? But in the US, I mean, or in some of the foreign countries, the youth is aware of how policy influences their.
Thank you so much for that video, Aditi. And Your Excellency, if I could just request you to give a message for the future for the GPOTS fellows and the team, that would be a great note to end this conversation on.
Well, first of all, thank you all for your difficult but very good questions. Thank you for listening to me. And I will message, I am just super grateful that for every young person that are engaged in international politics and really shaping the future, I find so much hope and optimism in meeting fellows like you. So just keep up, maybe I would say, the courage and the optimism and all that. I think we have also in the past been facing, when I was young, we were terribly afraid of the nuclear threat. We passed that today. And I really hope that we will be able to say the same when you have my age about the climate crisis. But just to say, keep up hope and your engagement. It's really, really appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. You have a nice day. Thank you so much for your message.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. So guys, as Arpit discussed, we're now going to move on to the discussion about GPOTS Fellowship. First of all, let me welcome all of you. It's been a pleasure listening into Her Excellency speak about her experiences. And we also did a slight plug with the former GPOTS alumni coming in and asking their questions as well. We were also, for those of you who are not well versed with the whole concept of GPOTS, we had a slide presentation that we have kind of recycled now over the past 3 months, but we have it prepared for all of you. And we'd like you to go through the website. The links are all posted in the chat box. If you want to converse with any of us separately, we'll also post our email IDs. But more importantly, on to GPOTS now. So what is this fellowship that everyone's been talking about? I know that a lot of you keep seeing these posts on social media and on other media. And so the question is, what is GPOTS in the first place? And why might I indulge in something like GPOTS? What does it do and what does it give? So first of all, let me start at the very beginning. GPOTS is one of the more uncreative ways of basically bringing about our idea to light, which is basically a fellowship to nurture, to inculcate, and to intrigue the fellows who join us about the various nitty-gritties of public policy, diplomacy, and climate change. So why I say that it's a very uncreative way of putting it is because the name itself is basically exactly this. So there's Global Policy, Diplomacy, and Sustainability Fellowship. And what we intend to do through this fellowship is that we have an intricate system where we basically create awareness, education, knowledge capital, all of those things. But that's not it. That's what separates GPOTS from every other educational task that you might undertake, because when we bring in mentors from 14 different countries, more than 40 mentors from around the globe, we don't just limit that interaction to a guest lecture that he might have with you or she might have with you. we try and open up the opportunity for you to build a private network, a personal network, get a conversation going with these global leaders. And how do we do that? We'll cover that during the presentation. But we provide for specific office hours outside the guest lectures, where you actually have the opportunity with other fellows to sit face to face with these global leaders and just ask them questions ranging from how's the weather back in Brussels to how do I become a UN diplomat? So the world is literally your oyster in those conversations, and how you take those conversations forward is absolutely an opportunity that you should seize on. So as I was saying, we have mentors from the public policy space. We have mentors from the international relations space. Obviously, we had Her Excellency speaking about her diplomatic experiences. And then we have mentors from the sustainability space, both, and all of these mentors basically cover the civil society scheme of things, the international government's scheme of things, the national governments. We have representatives from national governments coming in and mentoring all of you. We also have private and public sector companies, the heads of those companies coming and interacting with you, helping you with their experiences and sharing their career paths with you, because I know that a lot of us are at that inflection point in our careers where we either want to switch to any of these specializations or just develop a keen understanding on these specializations. So that's what we propose to do through this fellowship. As I mentioned, we cover 3 basic streams, which is public policy, diplomacy, which is international relations as well, or international political economy, if you will, and sustainability. And I'm not going to get into this discussion on the definition of sustainability, because I think it could cover everything under the sun. It could cover you and me and everything that surrounds us. But we have various thoughts on sustainability as well. So we have, for this cohort, for the incoming cohort, we have, for example, the chair of the International Water Law Association, the president of the International Water Law Association. We have people who are professors at various universities from around the globe. And when I talk of the academic view of things, I must also specify that we have 3 courses that we substantially teach. These are 20-hour courses over the next 3 months since the time that fellowship starts. And the syllabi for these courses has been almost handpicked from these Ivy League universities. And we've kind of created a very intensive syllabi for comparative public administration, international political economy, and global seminar on commons and climate change and public health. And what we intend to do through these 3 syllabi is to give you, depending on what your interest level is, the very basic of what you need to know to hold a conversation within these spheres. But also, if you're so interested, become experts in these spheres. So that is the idea behind going ahead with developing these syllabi. As I mentioned, it's a 3-month online fellowship. We have a couple of very cool things about this fellowship, which I'll come to a little later. But just to give you a brief overview of how it works, we have 3 major courses, which is what I already talked about: the comparative public administrations course, the international political economy course, and the global commons seminar series on sustainability, climate change, public health. We also have workshops, 5 workshops, which Arpit will talk about in a bit. And as I mentioned, we have over 40+ mentors who are not just there to give you a lowdown on what they have done in their lives, but also to help guide you and take you through where you want to be eventually in your life through the networking and office hours. About the 3 courses, Arpit, do you want to pick it up from here?
For sure, for sure. So I think, overall, when you look at this fellowship program, you'll see that you're going to be leaving with 3 different things. You're going to be leaving with domain knowledge, and that comes from these courses. You're going to be leaving with specific skills, and I'll talk about the skill development workshops that we have. And you'll leave with a lot of exposure by interacting with the mentors. And the way that we have designed this fellowship is based on this research that in order to build resilient careers, you need these three things broadly. You need resilient, you need a lot of exposure, you need resilient skills. And what I mean by resilient skills is skills that are good for today and skills that would hold you in good stead, let's say 20, 30 years down the line. The world is going to change a lot, but then these are certain skills that would help you survive and thrive in your careers even in the future. And what is obviously very essential is domain expertise, domain knowledge. So over here, we have carefully chosen these three courses because if you talk about public policy, if you talk about this sustainability, if you talk about diplomacy, we think that if you have a deep domain knowledge about these three things, you'll be able to navigate a lot of it on your own. So we have a course. This is the one that I teach, the comparative public administration course. This is the one that I teach at the San Francisco State University, and I've taught this in other different places. And in this particular course, essentially, you learn about why some policies are successful in some geographies, why they are the same policies are not successful in other places in the world. You compare and contrast various policies, and you eventually understand what are the factors you need to keep in mind to design effective policies. It's a methodological sort of a course. The next one is the International Political Economy and Diplomacy course. And one of the mentors I saw, he was attending the conversation with Her Excellency, Jonathan, who facilitates a part of this course. And this is a lot about how do you become effective diplomats? How do you essentially gain an understanding of various issues around, let's say, international trade or the great power competition, and understand it from the perspective of different players, different stakeholders in the international scenario. It could be state actors, it could be civil societies, it could be non-state actors, and really understand what it takes to be a diplomat. How do you think like a diplomat? And that requires a deep understanding of some of these issues over here. Okay, Jonathan is still here. He messaged me on the chat box. All right. And then we have the third one, which is the Global Commons Seminar series, which focuses on climate change and public health. And the reason why this becomes really important in understanding sustainability is, as you also heard Her Excellency speak, that climate change, global commons, and health are probably going to be the most challenging issues on the sustainability side that we are going to see in our lifetimes. So we have this seminar series where various experts come in. Ishan also teaches a major part of this course. And this is a lot about, how does the legal frameworks, the policy tools, and various economic theories come together to, it's a lot about the debates and, the way forwards that exist, the mental models that exist for us to be able to manage global commons. Now, eventually, what we want you to understand is that all of these three courses, they are interrelated and they build off of each other's content. So, for example, if Ishan is teaching about, something about how there is a leakage in pollution. So, one country has strict anti-pollution policies, then the companies simply move on to another country. So Ishan will probably be talking about very, core environmental issues and environmental models. At the same time, maybe Jonathan in the International Political Economy and Diplomacy course would be talking about what is the politics behind these environmental regimes, and what is the politics behind multinational companies dealing with various states to safeguard their interests about compliance and sustainability, etc., etc. At the same time, in my course, I will be dealing with issues such as how do certain policies, let's say in India, about sustainability compare to policies in Germany or in the United States. So at the end of the day, what we want is to for you to think that all of these things are interrelated. Now, that's about domain knowledge. I'll also talk a little bit about the workshops that we have. So Aditi, if you could change the slide, please. Thank you so much. So we have a number of workshops, and the way that we came up with these 5 workshops is also super interesting. We were part of an event at the World Economic Forum, and that's where, that is also the time when Yuval Noah Harari was speaking at the World Economic Forum, and we all had read his book, and there was a looming, and this is right before COVID, right? So there was a looming insecurity about how artificial intelligence and climate change and all of these things are going to make a lot of jobs obsolete. And we conducted a number of stakeholder discussions, both at Davos and then thereafter, to understand what would be the skills of the future, what would be the skills that build resilient careers, that hold you in good stead, not only now, because the jobs that we have right now may not be the same jobs that we'll be doing out there in the future. So we decided to conduct these stakeholder consultations, and what emerged from that very clearly was that there were certain skills that people need to have, and one of those skills were effective policy writing and communication. Whether you're in the public policy field or you're in any other vocation, effective policy writing and communications would really take your career to the next level. And that's the reason why we do a workshop series on this particular thing. We also encourage that we get our fellows to write a capstone project and then convert that capstone project into an article which we can help get published somewhere. So effective writing and policy communication is super important to us. The second bit is understanding sustainable economy and climate change. So there's a lot about, how the old economic models have failed, and they don't hold true for many of the things that we see happening in front of us. So this is also a lot about circular economy and almost a new logic about looking at markets. The third one is about problem solving. That's the public policy case studies. And that's a lot about, we give you a battery of cases from all across the world, from Mexico, from, the United States, from India, number of different countries, and cases related to water scarcity, cases related to political stakeholder negotiations, lots of different things. And the idea is that with all of the data crunching and with all of the stakeholder analysis that goes behind solving this case study and all of the negotiation simulations, you will come out as a person with a much more refined perspective and a robust mental model to understand just the complexity of a problem at hand. So that's what it is about. And building off of that is the systems thinking workshop, which talks about, how do different systems, they compare with each other? How would, let's say, a global oil crisis can spark off a war in some place, and that could really lead to unemployment in or a debt crisis in some other part of the world. So, all of those things is something that you would understand in a systems thinking workshop. And eventually what we realize is that fundraising is a very important skill, whether you're in the private sector or in the not-for-profit sector. You are going to be having to raise funds for your ventures or for the ventures that you're supporting. So that's also one particular workshop that we highly, highly value. So these are broadly the kind of skill development workshops that we have. And eventually we have mentorship. So Ishan, do you want to talk a little bit about our mentorship and what our office hours mean over here?
Yeah, so glad to, Arpit, thank you. And thank you for explaining. The reason why during these presentations I offload the heavy duty part to you is because it's very difficult to put it in words what we try and do with the courses. So thank you for doing it so well. Guys, so mentorship, I already kind of mentioned this, but the whole idea is to, and I've explained this earlier in one of my talks as well, that there's a difference between an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old professional and a 50 or a 55-year-old professional. And there are two basic differences there. One is the knowledge that you gain from working on the job or working in your specialization. And the second thing is the network you develop over the next 30 years, 40 years of your professional life. So what GPOTS tries to do through the mentorship sessions is that we bring in the experiential learning of these 55, 60-year-olds, people who are leaders in their space specialization. And they tell you about what they're doing, what's the cutting edge of policy, diplomacy, sustainability in their areas of specialization. But it does not stop there. What about the fact that a 25-year-old versus a 55-year-old has a lot lesser network? And what we do then is that these mentors also you are given an opportunity as a GPOTS fellow to kind of build your network with these 40 plus global leaders who come and address you. So we have this concept of office hours where, as I mentioned, you have a chance to, and there are some former fellows in the audiences, you could probably reach out to them as well, but you have a chance to sit across the table, so to speak, virtually, with these mentors. And we'll go through some of the mentors that we have for this cohort and just ask them about if you should do that PhD that you've been thinking about, if you should, how you should become a professional in that space that they are working in, or any other question. These are very informal talks that we arrange between the mentors and the fellows, and these are non-recorded, so you can be a little more free when you ask questions with these mentors about things that matter to you and what you want to achieve in your life. So that's the idea behind these mentorship sessions. And we'll probably, again, one of the things that we value most is diversity. So you see that not just in our fellows, but also in our mentors. We have mentors from 14 different countries. I think we've gone up to 20 now, but I'll have to fact check that. We have mentors from a lot of countries representing a lot of backgrounds, a lot of professional spaces where their expertise lie in. So because I am a sustainability professional, so I'll go back to my low-hanging fruit of an example, that when we talk of sustainability, it's not just apples that we're talking about. We're also talking about oranges and mangoes and every other fruit that comes with sustainability, because that's the whole idea of having so many diverse mentors along with so many diverse fellows. And some of the mentors that we have for this cohort, as you can see on the screen, we have Ms. Tanya Gonair, who's the chairwoman of GIZ. For those of you who have worked in environmental space, you've probably heard of her. We have Mr. Stefano Burci, who I already mentioned. He's the chairman of International Association for Water Law. We have Professor Christina Voigt of the University of Oslo, also the head of Climate Change Task Force of the IUCN, also one of the drafters of the Paris Agreement, or one of the legal advisors of the Paris Agreement. We have Mr. Mariwala, who is a business person. He is a water scientist in his own right, also an entrepreneur. So as you can see, we try and get people from diverse backgrounds. It'll be very difficult to cover all of them, so I'm just going to rush through them. We have Elizabeth Brima, who's the executive secretary, as you can see on your screen, of the Secretariat on Biological Diversity, Convention on Biological Diversity. Again, a very, very important tool for any budding policy analyst or sustainability professional to delve into. Biological diversity is going to be a game changer in the next few decades, if it isn't already, by the way. We also have David Tipping, who is obviously the advisor of International Water and Environmental Management, Sustainable Development and Disaster Recovery. And then we move on to communications and media. So we have Mr. Sanjay Baru, who is the author of the extremely famous book, An Accidental Prime Minister. He's also been the former media advisor to the former Prime Minister of India. And he'll be discussing with you things of how better to communicate your ideas, how to make them count a lot more than otherwise. We have a sitting Supreme Court judge of the Supreme Court of Hawaii, Justice Sabrina McKenna. Again, her specialty is law, constitutional law, policy, and environment. And then we have a bunch of other mentors who cover diplomacy. As you can see, Dr. Bastian Geikrich is the Director of Defense and Military Analysis at International Institute of Strategic Studies. We have Professor Katarzyna Pisarka, who's the founder and director of European Academy of Diplomacy in Warsaw. So And we have we have Lawrence Pirenza as well, who's the director of Transatlantic Defense and Security Center for European Policy Analysis. We also have Dr. Oliver Ruppel, who is a specialist in climate change, and he's written one of the seminal books on climate change as well. So my point was not to go through all of them, and we'll give you a bit of a teaser about all of our mentors when we come to the end of this presentation, and we could probably go one by one if time permits. But basically, we've tried to cover all the three spaces of mentors, so diplomacy, public policy, and sustainability, and how they will make a difference during the fellowship. And let me also digress here and tell you that most of these conversations that do end up happening with these mentors turn into very interactive discussions where you kind of share a bond with these mentors. Some of them are very forthcoming, and you can reach out to them separately as well, as some of our fellows have done over the past. I already talked about the interactive office hours, but we usually have time slots after the lecture where you can, not just after the lecture, but over the next couple of weeks, where you can fix a time in the time provided by the mentor and just have discussion with the mentor. These are time slots that are given to you with the mentor, as I said, non-recorded sessions, and you can discuss about their expertise, you can discuss about your expertise, and you can also slyly ask them how to go about finding a job or finding a paid position somewhere or an internship somewhere. I would encourage all of you to speak with our past fellows or directly to us to discuss how office hours work if there are any doubts about it. But these networking opportunities are worth their weight in gold, because it's, as I said, knowledge capital, expanding your knowledge is only one side of the coin. It's also about building your network. And if you can build your network directly with these mentors, if you can send them a WhatsApp every now and then or an email saying hi, that will go a long way in just taking your career in the right direction over the years. Now, you've already been introduced to some of them. I know that Caroline and Sahid have already spoken, and I again welcome them to this conversation. And we have had a very diverse cohort, the last one. We have some people who are in the, I know Malika's here as well, Marie was here, Arif was here, and we've had basically a very diverse cohort. And again, one of the reasons why we feel that GPOTS has become so successful is not just because of the mentors that we get or the lectures that we've coordinated, but because of the fellows that we've been able to handpick, and we've turned out to be very lucky with our decisions, because the conversation keeps happening. And in fact, just a little snippet for those of you who are planning to take the GPOTS fellowship, we'll also be having an international mixer with the past cohort in the coming weeks. And that is something to look forward to, because we every cohort is not a full stop, but merely a comma in the conversations that have to continue and building this GPOTS community over time. So that is something that we look forward to. Now, before I move on to the partners, I said that there's also a bit of fun element to GPOTS that we do not put in the presentation, or we haven't. Maybe we should add it. But we have this thing called virtual cafes, and we could probably have a discussion about this later as well. But we realized that given the fact that this is COVID, this is all online, and we're all struggling to make meaningful connections online, we started this concept that there would be an open link where any fellow at any point of time, if he or she is getting bored, can just text others in the group and say that, listen, let's get on and grab a coffee virtually. And what started as an idea which we were unsure of turned out to be quite great. In fact, we had sometimes, I would say this begrudgingly, but more people attended the virtual cafes than they did the lectures themselves. But why I'm telling you this is there's not just the networking that you do with the course instructors or the mentors who come and conduct these guest lectures and hold networking sessions. That is very important, and that is a very important takeaway from the GPOTS fellowship. But you also have intra-cohort networking, where you interact with your GPOTS fellows and get to know them, get to know their ideas, get to know their backgrounds, break the ice, have friends all over the world, as we do now already. And and just keep the conversation going with like-minded people. We've also added we've kind of tweaked the virtual cafe for this cohort, where we're now allowing the past GPOTS fellows also to be a part of the conversation with the current GPOTS cohort. So the virtual cafe is now to be open to 2 cohorts worth of GPOTS fellows. And this would also give you a chance to know more people and share your experiences and learn from the people who've been doing this for a single cohort already. Now, GPOTS would not have been possible without the unrelenting hard work put in by each of the team members, who we would name during the orientation of the next cohort, and our partners. So Envipol is an environmental consultancy, GPI is a centrist think tank, International Union for Conservation of Nature, all of you already know. We also have the Global Young Leaders Academy that is a partner with us. And we have and Arpit will have to help me out with ANCSSC and the full form there, or maybe John could chime in.
So that is the Associated Network for CSOs and NGOs for the South-South Cooperation. So it's part of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation.
So again, as I said, we have a bunch of partners and we hold a lot of events over the fellowship. So I think the last time we did 4 international events where our fellows spoke at various platforms, from the New York Climate Week in New York Climate Week, to the international migration seminar conducted by the UN, if I'm not wrong. And then we also had our GPOTS International Conference, where the fellows spoke on various topics, from space to waste management to water to public policy substantively. So what we try and do is give you all sort of like a greenhouse to grow, and to give you the opportunities to network with people from across the world, from your cohort, from the past cohorts, but also with these leaders that we have mentioned as mentors, over 40 plus in numbers, but they are very forthcoming and they're very inclusive in the way they speak with you. So I hope that you do reach out to us. All these links are already mentioned. I'll also put my email ID in the chat box. Please do write to us. If you have any doubts, if you just want to have a conversation about GPOTS or sustainability or policy or diplomacy, we're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And we do encourage you to apply. Now, one little point of business that I have to kind of mention is that the deadline for applying for the GPOTS fellowship is on the 17th of this month. So we're already on the 15th. There are about 2 days to go. We have a lot of queries about what all documents one must submit. And let me also clarify that all you need to submit is your resume and your statement of purpose. And statement of purpose does not have to be like a 5,000 word research publication. Just 500 words of why you might want to pursue this fellowship and what you might want to take out of it. Apart from that, you have the option of submitting your writing samples. You have the option of submitting your letters of recommendation if you have the time or if you have the convenience to do so. And that's about it. So please do write to us if you have any doubts, and please do reach out to us. We're always open for a conversation, sometimes annoyingly so. And I hope the conversation continues and you do write to us and keep in touch. So thank you so much for being a part of this. And thank you so much for our fellows who've been here from the last cohort. And thank you so much for those of you who have already joined our next cohort. So pleasure interacting with you, and let's take the conversation forward. Thanks so much, all of you.
Thank you so much. And now we'll take questions. And Caroline, thank you for that little plug and encouraging message in the chat box over there. Thanks to all of our first cohort fellows who are here. We really appreciate you taking the time and being part of this today. And it's obviously really nice seeing you. Okay, so I have already a question from Swasti. So I'm going to take that question first. And when others have questions, they can probably just unmute themselves. Swasti, would you want to unmute yourself and ask your question so that the others could also hear about this? Rishika, is there a way we could unmute Swasti? Probably.
Hi, Arpit. Hi, everyone
There
else.
you go.
Yeah, finally, I think I was able to unmute myself.
Awesome.
And thank you for the superb presentation. It was so elaborate in terms of touching on every aspect of the fellowship. So thank you for taking that up. I was just curious to know, as you spoke about the structure of the fellowship as well, to understand like what are the typical expectations from a GPOTS fellow post completion of the fellowship, if any at all, which is of course like becoming champions of the cause itself, around 3 pillars. So just curious to know if there are any further expectations.
Certainly. I think I can take this up. So uh, on a larger scale, yes, we definitely want you to be the champions of that cause, but then there are at least a couple more expectations in addition to that. So one more expectation is that not just be ambassadors of those issues, but then really have a deep understanding of some of the solutions, or if not the solutions, but then at least the problems that exist. And the only way to understand the solution is to understand some of these underlying problems in depth, and seeing the interconnectivity between these problems of sustainability, public policy, and diplomacy. So what we want, like ideally, typically what we want from our fellows is not just to be folks who are really passionate about these issues. Obviously we want that, that's a necessary but not a sufficient sort of a requirement or expectation. What we really want is be really passionate, but then also have a deep understanding of what is possible, where you can innovate, where you cannot innovate, what works where. So just having a very good grip on the reality, that's certainly very important. Another thing that we expect from our fellows is to also have the agency to create the change that they envision to create. And that's the reason why personally, once you're a fellow, we invite you to all of our conferences, all of our closed door briefing sessions with, like most of our closed door briefing sessions with corporates, or uh, talks that are happening right now. So almost for the partnership organizations, especially Global Policy Insights and WIPOL, all of our events and all of our engagements are open to the fellows, so that they can build their networks, they can expand their networks, and we can help all of the fellows in whatever way that we can. And that's the reason why we focus so much on mentorship, so that we can you guys can actually build those solid connections that help you bring about some substantial change. So those are the overall expectations from a vision perspective. From the perspective of graduating the fellowship, the expectations are definitely that you either in person or asynchronously, because we also record all of our sessions. We expect you to attend almost all of our sessions. So that's what we expect you to do, so that you actually are building out on those perspectives, and to submit a capstone project. So which means a 5 to 6 page document, wherein you choose a particular problem, and that could be a public policy, a sustainability or diplomacy issue, or a cross-cutting issue. And you submit a written document about how do you perceive the problem, where do you see that problem going in the future, what could be the potential solutions, and some recommendations, stuff like that. So those are very simple requirements that we have in order for you to graduate as a fellow. Does that answer your question, Swasti?
Yes, Arpit, thank you so much for the detailed answer. It does, and I think it's a beautiful expectation to have, considering the fellowship is offering so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swasti.
So guys, in case we do not have any other questions, I think we'll end this right here. I have put my email ID in the chat box. I think Arpit will put his as well. And you could reach out to us in case of any questions. Again, I hope that you do apply. And for those of you who have applied, I hope that you join in the conversation with not just us, but the GPOD's fellows of the past who are already present here. And looking forward to seeing you all soon. Have a good time. I hope the new year is coming along well. And yeah, see you guys on the other side of the application deadline.
See you guys. Thank you so much. Feel free to write to us for any other questions. We are more than happy to engage. Thank you.